Hello everybody, this is Hammer Striker here. I've got a couple easy to rack 380s sitting here on the table. Please don't forget to check out our website. Go to our affiliates page. You'll find discount codes for things like Mantis Axe and Core belts. Link to that cool little bore light that we use for lighting up the barrels. Use those links. It will often save you money, never will cost you any additional money, and helps the channel. And please consider supporting the channel on Player, formerly Utreon, where we can do some types of videos that are no longer allowed on YouTube. This one is the Smith & Wesson Shield EZ, of course chambered in 380, and the one behind it is the newer Ruger Security 380, and both of these have the same basic characteristics of being very easy to rack, chambered in 380, a little bit on the larger side compared to some of the pocket 380s that are popular, which for the target audience of somebody that has possibly compromised hand strength is an advantage. You can actually get a hold of them. Some of the tiny little things are harder to hold. So let's kind of go through the differences between the two of these. Notice how easy the slide is to rack. This is the M&P, and when it first came out, it was one of the easiest to rack 380s that were out there. Now if I pick up the Ruger is almost equally easier, and it almost feels like it might just be a hair easier, but they're so close to each other as to not make a difference. So whichever one of these you pick, you're going to have a very easy to rack slide. You do get at least a 2-finger grip. Now with the flush mag in the Ruger, it holds 10 rounds. And with the pinky extender, you actually get a full 3-finger grip. Even if I have it all the way up there, I've got a full 3 fingers. It does come with a non-finger grip extension flush base plate you can put on. In that case, you would get about 2 fingers. When you go to the M&P, there's only one mag available, and the grip just by default is a 3-finger grip. There are thinner grips, both of them. The Smith & Wesson's a hair thinner than the Ruger. The Smith & Wesson comes in at 1.02. Actually, I misspoke. The Shield comes in at 104 width, and the Ruger at 102, and you might look at it and say, oh, that can't possibly be right. If you look at the Ruger closely, you'll see that the slide and the whole frame and the grip are all the same size. And if you look at the Shield a little bit, you'll see that the top part of it's much thicker. So they're quoting the slide size, but the grip tapers down quite a bit. That does give you a thinner grip. Because it's a little bit of a wider grip, you still kind of get a good handle on it, but this particular grip shape may be difficult for some. The Ruger is a little more of your classic oblong grip. It's actually overall circumference is a little bit less. Neither of these have replaceable back straps, so the grip that you see is the grip you see. The Ruger comes with thumb safety, and that's your only option. It also has the inertial trigger, toggle, and an internal drop piston safety. So this is very, very drop safe. The EZ does not have a inertial toggle. It uses this grip safety. One of the negatives of this grip safety, unlike many, is that it doesn't go all the way in. It kind of stops here. So it ends up kind of pushing right here, and you can kind of feel it. It is available with a thumb safety. This particular one doesn't have it, but I found that on this particular version of it, the grip safety is not as comfortable as others that we've had that have a grip safety. I wish this would just go flush so that you actually didn't have this little protrusion at the top and you didn't have it biting in here. Because recoil on 380 is pretty light, it doesn't really make a difference at the range. It doesn't beat up your hand, but when you grab a hold of it, right now I'm holding on to it. I'm holding it tight like I was going to shoot it, and I feel it right here. It's not distributing the stress evenly over my overall hand. It does not have the inertial toggle. The grip safety is what takes the place of that, and it does have the internal drop safety pistons. From a sights perspective, I like the Smith & Wesson sights much better. They're a 3-dot white sight, and the Ruger has a fiber optic at the front, which is nice, but a blackout at the rear, which I don't like quite as much. The one other note I'll put is there's a pretty pronounced beaver tail on the Smith & Wesson. Kind of gets right up in there. There is no external hammer. These are both internally hammer fired. So there's no external hammer, nothing to hammer bite you. And the Ruger kind of just ends. Overall, it's still comfortable, and because, again, there's no external hammer, you really don't need the extended beaver tail. But when you grab a hold of the Ruger, you don't have that kind of that feeling of it wrapping around and protecting your hand. I haven't gotten slide bit by either one of these, so it's more of just a feel than it is anything that's truly tangible. Both of them have a Picatinny rail. You can see there's a 3-slot rail on both of them. They're both have front and rear serrations. The front serrations on both of these are a little bit kind of thin. The rear serrations are well pronounced and easy to use. So overall, as far as the ergonomics, they're both almost the same. There is one difference. If you go to the Smith & Wesson, there's a bit of a wing here that is meant to catch your fingers, which if you've got compromised hand strength, it makes it even easier to pull the slide back. And on this one, it doesn't have a wing, but the last serration kind of stands up a little bit. So it kind of creates the equivalent of a wing. It's less pronounced. You don't necessarily see it unless you look closely. But this last serration is taller than all the others. So as I come back, if I'm starting to slide, I'm going to hit that wing at the back. So again, ergonomically designed to be able to be handled well by somebody with potentially compromised hand strength. Dimensionally, they're similar. There's a few key dimensions that are different. So the length of the Ruger is 6.52 front to back, and the length of the Smith & Wesson is 6.7, so it's 0.2 inches longer. Smith & Wesson is longer, but not enough to make a difference in whether or not you could carry it. The height is similar, but the Ruger is definitely shorter, until you factor in if you have the pinky extender on it. So if you just have the flush base plate without the pinky extender, the Ruger is 4.35, the Smith & Wesson is 4.98. That can make a big difference because the grip is the hard part to hide when you're concealed carrying. So you have the option to make the Ruger shorter if you choose to without the pinky extender. With the pinky extender, they're close enough to be the same. And we already talked about the thickness. They're really, other than the grip designed differently, the thickness that you have to hide, that you would have to put inside the waistband or wherever you're going to put this, is roughly the same. The barrel lengths are a little different, 3.42 for the Ruger and 3.678 for the M&P, which somewhat accounts for the length. But on 380, that difference isn't going to make a difference in reliability, accuracy, muzzle velocity. That's going to matter. So overall, you're going to pick these, in this case, not necessarily from their raw dimensions, but from how they fit and feel in your hands. Now, one thing I didn't mention earlier that is actually a big difference between these two is if I eject this 10-round magazine, which is already starting out of the gate 2 more than the 8 you get in the Smith & Wesson, comes with 2 of these magazines. The Ruger comes with 1 10-round magazine and, unless you buy the state-compliant version, 1 15-round magazine. And when you put that 15-round magazine in, you now have, in the same basic footprint, let me put the mag back in the Smith & Wesson, you now have almost double the capacity that the Smith & Wesson has in the same overall footprint. 15 plus 1 in the pipe, 8 plus 1 in the pipe. So at this point, that's a major advantage for the Ruger. You're getting towards the point now that unless there was something you hated about the Ruger, you would probably look in that direction because that capacity, without losing any of the other features, is going to be there. MSRP is going to tilt you too. $369 for the one that you see here, $389 for the state compliant version, and the state compliant version basically just comes with 2 10-round magazines. And a lot of manufacturers are starting to charge more for the state compliant ones because they have to go through certification processes and paperwork and nonsense. So they're starting to factor that into the price of the gun. The Smith & Wesson comes in a couple different varieties, but the one you see here, MSRP is $454. So at this point, you're about $80 more than the Ruger with the base model. Then it goes up for MSRP of $521. There's a version of this with True Glow night sights from the factory, which whether you like the sights or not, you can change them. So on both of these guns, both of the sights are changeable on both of these. So if you get one or find one that has a set of sights that you don't like, you can swap them out fairly easily. Actually, I misspoke. 521 is for the thumb safety version. 605 is the True Glow night sights. And then they do have a Performance Center version of this, and it's $643. So it's kind of a big spread from $454 to $643, almost a $200 spread as you go up to the options, start dragging it through the parts bin. But even if you just look at base model to base model, the Ruger's got more capacity and a noticeably lower price. So that is something that is probably going to influence you. So let's talk about the triggers, because of course the trigger can make a big difference, sometimes ruining or making one shine. So decent amount of take up, but it's very smooth, very light. Notice there is an over travel stop here. Kind of a nice, crisp, really light brake. reset is most of the way out, and there's a little bit of take up to get back on the wall, and then again a nice crisp break. It's a nice trigger. It's not an awesome trigger, but it's far from a bad trigger overall. It is a nice trigger, and it is easy to use and worked well at the range. Smith & Wesson, a little less take up, again equally smooth and light, over travel stop as well. Really short, crisp, light break. The reset is almost all the way out on the original trigger pull, but it is so short to begin with that it ends up effectively being a short reset and then a nice crisp break. And I did let it creep out a little bit, so I'm going to do this one more time. There is just a hair of take up to get back on the wall and then the break. I would say that the Smith & Wesson wins on the trigger, but not by a huge margin. Almost to the point that when you get to the range and live fire, you might not be able to tell the difference between the two, but sitting here on the table, I can see that the Smith & Wesson has a slightly better trigger overall. Both of these were actually relatively easy to shoot well, with one exception. I don't like blackout sights, so I had a little more hard time finding the target with the Ruger. From a mechanical accuracy standpoint, I think the Ruger has the same mechanical accuracy, could be shot equally well. I just, with that blackout sight, I had a harder time doing it. Obviously that's fixable. You could either put dots on the sight or you could replace the sights. But as far as actually just shooting it well, ignoring the sights, I would say they came in both about the same. In the end, it's going to come down to which one would I pick? That's going to kind of be an interesting answer because it may not be the answer you expect. The Ruger wins on price. The Ruger wins on capacity. But I would actually choose the Smith & Wesson. And here's why. Though we had no trouble with the Security 380, we have had more trouble with the Ruger semi-automatics than we've had with any in the M&P series, in the recent M&P series. We've had more cases where we had different issues with the Rugers in general, whereas the Smith & Wessons, for the most part, have just worked. The Smith & Wesson has a no-thumb safety option, which I prefer. I still have the negative of the grip safety, and the fact that it doesn't go flush, not the fact that it exists. But I actually probably would pay a little bit more, give up the capacity if I were trying to solve the the hand strength issue, and probably would go with the Smith & Wesson. I do think, since this particular one has been reliable, if you get one of these and it's reliable, I don't see anything necessarily wrong with it. It's just that I have a better track record with these. Beyond that, if you like our videos, please give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe, click the bell to be notified if you do. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Rumble, Getter, and on Player, where we can actually do some additional types of videos we no longer can do on YouTube. And thank you.